Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. I'm David Gouthro. This is Discover Fresh Perspectives, and today I have as my guest Jim Brosseau. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, David, for having me on today. And it took a while for us to get to this, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, the expectations are exceptionally high on my part now. So, Jim, when we first started chatting this morning, we said that what might be interesting to talk about is sort of the right brain and the focus on that and the need to focus more on it. And let's just dive into that. So first of all, when you say right brain, what do you mean by that?
I'm thinking of the creative, the nonlinear side of things that generally isn't something that has been rewarded in our education system. That isn't part of the typical expectations around projects, around the industry, that sort of thing. And I think, they're essentially, when we're looking for creativity or innovation in projects these days, we kind of need to turn that side of the brain on to be able to access those things. And in organizations that are more and more these days based on knowledge-based work, that's the sort of thing that will differentiate you from the crowd. And if you can't turn those on, it's pretty well impossible from my perspective to be able to come up with innovation, new ideas, creative ways of doing things. And I'm seeing a shift over the last couple of decades, and I'd love to see it accelerate.
So just so that listeners have an opportunity to understand sort of the perspective you come at this from. So you're not a high school student now. You've been around a bit. Maybe you could just kind of walk us through the sort of the different stages of your work and your life. Not a full resume, but what are the different things that you've done? And now today, you are seeing how important this bright brain or creative thinking is. So how have you come to that? What's the path you've taken?
Oh, wow. Typically I was very much technically focused. I actually was thinking of being a doctor when I was a kid, but that didn't pan out very well. I ended up getting a degree in physics, but I did much of my work in technology, in software projects. I spent about 10 years doing embedded systems work in Ottawa.
Embedded systems work. I don't want to assume that we have people know all these
small
terms.
teams, small projects. Somebody would build some hardware, and I'd write some software to control a device or something like that. And we'd very small, straightforward projects. Things like today you'd call them Internet of Things, or things that you might play with Arduino boards or something like that. Relatively small projects.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do with small teams, like 5 people, 5 months, get it done.
Okay.
I moved to Vancouver in 1990, and I spent 6 years on a very different project, an air traffic control project.
Oh.
At its peak, there were 250 engineers. The original schedule suggested a 5-year project. It was 17 years before we delivered. It was an extra $1 billion of Canadian taxpayer money. But I'm still comfortable flying in Canadian airspace because the quality of the product was good enough to sustain us for the next few decades, which is great. And it was there that I came to realize that there was no one size fits all for projects. Mm-hmm. They come in dramatically different shapes and sizes, even within the tech sector. And it was there that I took a course out of SFU. It was called Project Management, the Team Approach. And I know now, because I've actually been teaching that course for decades, and I actually purchased the business. The project management element of that title puts bums in seats, because everybody's like, oh, we got to do project management sort of thing. But then we would lock the door and we go, this is about teams and relationships and culture and personality and things like that. And it completely shifted or augmented, I would guess, the perspective that I had on what's necessary and valuable for successful projects. Mhm. And after that, for about 20 years or so, I've been running my own business, working with organizations to help them figure out how to get better at delivering product, at providing value for customers. And in my experience, more often than not, it has nothing to do with the procedures, the process that they're doing. It has to do with the culture,
Hmm.
the relationships that they have within the organizations, and how they work with one another, how they work with their clients, that sort of thing. And a big part of that is the distribution of trust.
Hmm.
Because if you go back, and this is something that's kind of evolved in my head over the last 20 years or so, a lot of it has to do with culture. And when we think about culture, we think about where we were born or what our background is, that sort of thing. But there's also culture at different layers. There's culture within your family unit. There's culture from where your background is, but there's also organizational culture, and there's also domain culture as well. And in big projects, or in the space that I've been in over the last 20 years, um, a lot of the culture comes from the Industrial Revolution, from the late 1800s, 1900s sort of thing, which is very much command and control, hierarchical, very much structured in terms of process. And that serves pretty well for projects where the bulk of the effort is labor based. Worked well for the pyramids, worked well for putting out a national railroad. Large buildings, even today, benefit from that kind of approach. But as we move into knowledge based approaches for doing things, that grind them down, burn them out, run them hard, get new people in when they're tired, um, doesn't serve the organization very well at all.
Hmm.
Uh, I left that air traffic control project after 6 years with stress related illnesses.
Wow.
Doctor was saying, "Get the hell off the project. It's not doing well for you at all." And we had 40% turnover a year on that project.
Wow.
250 engineers. We had 100 people every year leaving the project for one reason or another.
Sorry,
And
and do you still feel comfortable flying, you said?
I do, because the controls were in place such that we would not release anything that suffered from poor quality in any way.
Okay.
So I'm good with that. I'm still an advocate for the system that's out there. And I'm glad it took 17 years instead of trying to cram it out in 5. Um, and so what I realized in hindsight is that we were living almost exclusively in a industrial revolution organizational culture. Run them hard, burn them out. Doesn't matter if they leave, because there were people chomping at the bit to get on that project. It was one of the premier software projects probably in the world. And we had people from all around the world. So we had to engage with people very much for the first time, from people from Eastern Europe or Australia or all over the place, just to get the expertise in to do the work that we had to do. And so the culture on that project, very much command and control, top down sort of thing. I believe that that was one of the things that prevented us from delivering anywhere close to on time. Um, and it's one of the things that prevented us from doing some of the innovative things that we were trying to do on that project. Because people, that with the ideas behind command and control is that you can identify exactly what needs to be done up front and just procedurally get it done all the way through. And there were a couple of major features in this system that we had proposed that we ended up not delivering at all, because of what's the best way to describe this? The inability of leadership to wrap their head around doing something different than the status quo
So,
in software
so
development.
I try to figure out, what might be behind that, and is it the lack of predictability? Is it the lack of courage? It's the discomfort with ambiguity or uncertainty or things like that. Like the, what makes people remain comfortable in that command and control environment, even though there might be an advantage to stepping outside that particular type of culture.
I think I think the big thing is power,
Mm,
because in a command and control structure, power is wielded at the top,
mm.
and any suggestion that you might change the structure of how work is done by distributing power across the organization to give people opportunity to provide insights, kind of like the Toyota approach to building cars, that sort of thing, where anybody can shut down the production line. Um, that is often seen as a loss of power for the people that are at the top. And I've worked in organizations where intellectually they can wrap their head around this distribution of power, but when push comes to shove, they'll yank it all back when it appears that it just might not work as planned.
What I'm struggling with a little bit here is, the difference between power and control. Is the power important because then they have control, or I just wonder what the relationship is between those two. Like, because there's power, there's ego, there's, what do you have when you have control that you don't have? And is it about distributing power or about distributing control? I don't want to make this a semantic argument. It's just something I'm struggling with as I'm
Mm.
listening to you speak.
Yeah, and I think about that when people are leading an organization, and I think this is true still in the majority of organizations these days. When they're on top, when they're the CEO, um, there is a perception. It is part of the culture that comes from the Industrial Revolution that they're responsible for making the important decisions, and it can be difficult for people to relinquish, I guess, control is the word that you used a minute ago, to others, to be able to say, yes, I'm comfortable with you making a decision based on your perspective, and I'm going to abide by it, and we're going to move forward with it. And I think that's a valuable thing to be able to do, because especially if you're looking at large systems like an air traffic control system or something like that, nobody in the world is going to be able to wrap their head around that whole project.
Yep.
They need to be able to trust, they need to be able to enable uh, others to be able to make decisions that are going to have impact on the direction the project takes. And they need to be able to live with that, to work with that. And that, I think, is a leadership thing as opposed to a bossing thing. And that gets bantered around these days quite a bit.
Yeah, so some of the words that are rattling around in my head, I was going to say rolling around, but the truth is they're probably rattling. We've the concept of the relationship between some of these words, like the relationship between trust and the willingness to relinquish control. It's kind of hard to do that if you don't have the trust.
Mhm.
Also, where we start to build in sort of the right brain, metaphorically, the creativity part of this. So, let's assume that this model does not work, the command and control, for a number of reasons, the industrial model. So how do you start to make the shift to something like what rationale do you give people to help them be a little more comfortable with making that shift? And are there skills that are required? Or is it just mindset? Or how do we move to something that's going to be more effective in this day of complexity and unpredictability?
I think there's a couple of things. And one of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years is that it's not a shift from right brain to left brain. It's an augmentation or a growth of using the whole brain.
Okay.
So it's not replacing command and control, because, there are structures that are needed to make sure a project is progressing, that sort of thing. but it's accepting the fact or the notion, not everybody sees it as a fact, that with an understanding of what other people bring to the table and their strengths and an appreciation for that and being able to harness that as a way of collaborating rather than being top down in terms of leadership structure, we get more ideas to draw from. We get a broader perspective of the problem space. We get an appreciation for the contribution of others. And if people are involved in solving a problem or planning a project or something like that, there's also ownership that they have in that as well. And that ownership is going to give people that much more commitment to achieve
Mhm.
what they've chosen to or what they've been assigned to do on a project. So there's tons of benefits even before we get to creativity and innovation that a collaborative approach to running projects has beyond strictly a command and control. I'm going to build the project plan. Here, you guys do this, and if you don't like it, go away. I'll get somebody else. Um, and so with knowledge-based work, we layer on top of that the ideas about creativity and innovation, and from a business perspective, being able to differentiate from the competition. We get that much further ahead. And so it's not the idea that command and control is dead. Let's sweep it away and be done with it. There's value in some of the structures there, but they shouldn't be wielded to the point where they overwhelm the ability for people to effectively collaborate with one another.
So let's say that people have made the mental shift to the importance of augmenting so command and control with something that's more creative and so on and so forth. How do you actually get people to shift that? So it's very easy for me to say, yeah, good idea, but also I haven't got a clue how to go about doing that. So how do we actually help people or hold them in a place where they can start to embrace not just the concepts and the theory, but the actual practices of augmenting command and control with something more creative?
I think a lot of it has to do with stepping back, even outside the notion of projects, to the idea of how we engage with one another.
Hmm.
Um, we're all, sometimes I'll ask people, who do you talk to the most in any given day? And everybody will say maybe their partner or something like that. And I'm like, wrong. It's you. You got this internal voice that's driving things 24/7, right? And that is going to be that's a huge driver in terms of appreciating your perspective of the world around you, and in doing so, diminishing the perspective of others.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of work that a lot of us can do to become more appreciative, to better understand other people that you're working with, that you're partnered with, that you have in casual relationships, sort of thing. And the idea of empathy as a simple point. Empathy is very often wielded as, yeah, I get it, you're busy, but we got stuff to do, sort of thing. And empathy is so much deeper than that. I mean, Brene Brown talks about it a lot. Um, my favorite quote about empathy comes from Daniel Dennett. He's a philosopher, and what he said once is that um, you can really only know that you've achieved true empathy. I'm paraphrasing here.
Uh-huh.
Um, you can only know that you've achieved true empathy when the other person says, here's you paraphrase what they've just said, and they're able to say, thank you. I wish I could have stated that as eloquently as you just did.
Mhm.
So empathy isn't agreement. It's about just understanding why a person holds a perspective that they do, which can often be different than yours.
Hmm.
And many of us really struggle with that notion of empathy, of being able to carry two different perspectives in the air at the same time and recognize that your truth is not necessarily the absolute truth.
And that there isn't that the objective is not necessarily come to agreement on
Yeah,
something.
yeah, absolutely. That it's really just to be comfortable with holding these different perspectives in play and being able to work with them to look for a common path forward out of that. So it's really it's kind of a precursor to even getting into the realm of how we run projects. It's how we engage with one another, and that's it's and in learning that myself over the years, that's made a difference in my marriage. It's made a difference in how I engage with the kids. It's a difference in how I appreciate the friends around me, that sort of thing, because I can't possibly have the capacity to know it all. And so you have to have a really healthy dose of humility to enter the game when you're engaging with others.
So I'm gonna push on this a little bit, Jim. So how do you get there? Like, how do you develop the skill in doing that, the willingness to do that, the competence that leads to the confidence to be able to be comfortable with ambiguity? How do you get there? What are some things that you can do? Some recommendations that people said, yeah, sounds good. I haven't got a clue where to get started on it. How I get there? How I come to be more comfortable with embracing some of these things?
Wow. I think first is to recognize that all of these are actually a thing. And again, in my experience in working in industry, in a lot of different industries, all of those ideas have been kind of diminished in our education system, in how businesses run. Like in your education system, you get in preschool and it's like, okay, Bobby, there's your seat over there, and that's where you're going to sit every day. And don't be disruptive because that's a pain in the butt for me as a teacher, sort of thing. And you're taught to absorb information and regurgitate on tests and that sort of thing. So creativity, innovation, appreciation for the value that others bring, collaboration are pretty well torn out of us. And
And a lot of and just sorry to interrupt, but a lot of in schools arts based programming and source of creativity are being defunded,
totally,
which just
totally.
makes it
Music
just any
or
harder.
visual arts, all of that stuff. And it's so learning to play an instrument or
Mm.
is a tool that you can use to be more appreciative. Learning to collaborate with others when you're playing instruments or that sort of thing is a great way of learning to connect with what they're saying, sort of thing. So we're in a situation in our culture, and here I'm talking about our business culture, um, where over the last couple of 100 years, it's been largely command and control. And that's one of the things about culture is that if you haven't been exposed to any other culture, you're not even aware that culture as a term exists.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that I've worked with in industry where I talk about the ideas around collaboration there, and they're totally disrupted because it's like, oh, I can't do that, that sort of thing. So we've got a long way to go to build up these skills again, these left brain skills. We need to um, step back and appreciate that some of the things that we presumed about others are stories that we just made up.
Mhm.
um, and that we're better served by actually, if we're not sure why somebody did something they did, to ask them why.
Be curious.
Be
Yes.
curious. What was it? It was a Ted Lasso episode in season one where he was throwing darts, and he quoted somebody, uh, "Be curious, not judgmental,
Mm.
in how you interact with others." That sort of thing. And because when we do make up stories about others, they tend to be judgmental, biased, um, and they tend to pull us apart from one another. So we need to learn to take the time to be curious. And people say, "Oh, we don't have time for that." But if people did proper cost accounting on projects,
Mm.
they would find that at least half of the cost of the whole project is waste due to interpersonal disruption. You know, so there is a business imperative, a business value for moving in that direction. Um, Unfortunately, I haven't, codified the right approach to get in everybody's head that this is a better way to go.
Well, so I want to do a little. I'm not sure that's divergent. I think these things connect because I know that you are interested in improv.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things that you've talked about, improv might actually be an entry point into developing some of the skills you're talking about. Like, can you say a little bit more about that, about improv, excuse me, improv and how you see it, helping a person realize some of the things we've been talking about so far?
Yeah, absolutely. A past student of mine connected me to this notion of improv in the business world. And we actually took a couple of intro to improv classes downtown a couple of months ago. I brought my wife along as well. And what I've gained is a massive appreciation of the skills that improvisers have. They're not just making stuff up on the fly and they're naturally funny or something like that. Um, there's some rules, there's some skills that you can learn and you can build on to become a better collaborator. Almost everybody has heard of yes and
Mhm.
as an approach for improv, where your job, whenever you're interacting with somebody else in a scene, in a setting, somebody makes an offer. They might say, Jed, we got a lot of cows to milk in the barn right now. And your job, when you hear that, is to accept it and to build on it, not to reject it outright.
Yeah,
And
we have no cows. We have sheep in there. What are you talking about?
yeah, that sort of thing.
Uh,
Um, and a lot of people even struggle with getting to that point of accepting that. And that is something that you get better at with practice. And all of these are skills that are teachable, that are learnable. Um, and so yes, and is a way of getting us to the point where we're able to engage with one another, not really knowing exactly where the destination is. One of the things about improv is you don't know where the endpoint's going to be. It's going to emerge, and humor emerges. The job in improv isn't to be funny; it's to just continue these scenes, and humorous things will emerge as you go into wacky different directions and all that sort of thing.
So
And
you've talked about you used the word trust and empathy and things like that. Is there a connection between those and improv as well?
well, absolutely. You learn very quickly over time, even in these intro sessions, that there are some players that you work with that you can trust to accept your offers and to move forward with them. Um, there and there's others that still haven't really made it to that point, and they're going to be disruptive, and you're kind of left dangling, and well, where do we go from here, sort of thing. So there's a what's is it a set of skills? It is an attitude. It is a way of engaging with others, such that you don't know where the end point is, but you're there to learn, to enjoy, to
Mhm.
contribute, to be part of something that ends up being better than it was when you started. And that's really, if you can wrap your head around that and you can be good at that. And it's interesting because after I finished the second round of intro to improv, the instructor gave me a note and he said, maybe you should take round two again. And I totally appreciate that
Huh,
because you've got to build the reps. You've got it's like weightlifting, it's like anything else. You've got to this has to become second nature for you. You can't really go into a meeting and be told that you have to accept somebody's offer and do it smoothly
right.
if you
Huh.
haven't done that before. So you've got to build reps. And at and when you start doing that, you learn and to appreciate that other contributions that people make are things that would have never been on your radar. And that gives you a bigger space of Lego blocks to play with as you're building this new thing that you're trying to build.
It occurs to me that one would get some interesting insights about how deeply rooted they are in command and control based on how willing and open they are to engage in improv like activities and conversations. Like that,
Yeah.
that like maybe the harder if I were to take some improv classes and found it really hard to do this to let go, that's probably an indication that I should hold up a mirror and say, so, what is there in the rest of my life or in my work we're doing the same sort of thing. What are the opportunities to start to let go, and that self-awareness would seem to be so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's self-awareness, it's other awareness, and connecting those two. I'm running a new course at UBC this fall, and my intent is to bring in some elements of improv, not as, hey, we're doing improv, but kind of as icebreakers before each session, that sort of thing. And I will tie it back to my experience with improv and some of the bigger things that we've talked about here, to get people, just to expose them to the notion that if you're open to it, there's a much broader space to explore
Mhm.
out there. And we'll see how that goes. I expect it's going to go really well. Um, and that's the sort of thing that I think we're seeing more of these days. I mean, if you, we've talked about this before, there's a lot of resources available for improv in industry already.
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to see it get beyond, hey, we're bringing in an an improv guy today, and we're gonna do some wacky stuff, and then okay, let's get back to work. I
Right.
want to make sure that the ideas behind there stick, that people learn and appreciate and grow as a result of those ideas, because that's kind of the early stages of getting to the point where we can unleash the left side of our brain, and where we can be like really crazy and creative, and out of that can come solutions that nobody had thought of before.
I find it interesting how sometimes a word and different interpretations of the word puts up a barrier to embracing with it. I think improv might be one of those, because I think when a lot of people think improv, they think improv, theater on stage, not for me, as opposed to, what sort of the DNA of improv does for us individually and
Mhm.
collectively. Maybe it's about improving as opposed to improv. Like, because there's so many words that throw up, where people throw up at the thought of it. I'm
Yeah,
not going to do
the
that
expectations. Yeah,
instead of embracing. Yeah. So,
yeah,
so I think
and
the fact that you're doing that at UBC at the beginning of your course is great. So people get to have an experience of it without having to label it and let it get in the way of using that kind of thinking as a way to augment the skills or whatever it is that they're learning to do.
yeah, absolutely. And it's those labels that get us in trouble. And a lot of the labels that I see in the industrial culture these days has to do with a defined process or an approach to do things. And people get so caught up in the mud around the details of that they forget to actually talk to one another. About what do we really need to deliver as value, and to talk to the customer and to genuinely understand what they need before you even get started, sort of thing.
I
So
want to. Sorry.
go ahead.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, Jim, which is about it's not about getting rid of command and control. It's about augmenting it and
Yeah.
and having the choice which to use. Because certainly there's times when it's really important that something work right. Like if you're a neurosurgeon or something, there's a right way to do things. However, if you come up with something that's not been seen before, then you have to improvise. Right. And when is important, we're being right, it's absolutely critical. And when does it get in the way? And to be
Mhm.
able to step back and not operate on automatic, but be mindful and say, given this situation, how do I need to be thinking about this? How do I need to be approaching this in order to get the result I'm looking for?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think one of the things you said is when to learn to, I forget exactly the term, to be collaborative or something like that. And I think really when I talk about augmenting, I'm thinking about using the left brain in doing right brain activities.
Okay, say that again.
As an example, I just broke my arm a little while ago. And it was because my brother came to town and we got overly competitive on the pickleball court. Um, but when he got into town, we sat out on our deck on the first day and we pulled out post-it notes, figuring out what the heck we were going to do
Hmm.
over the whole span of the week that he was here. And, so we were project planning and everybody was laughing, aha, Jim, what a geek, sort of thing. But the thing is, when we did this collaboratively, everybody had post-it notes in their hands and they were contributing different events to different days, that sort of thing. we were using collaborative, appreciative approaches in what is traditionally thought of as
Mm,
a right brain activity, project planning.
mm, mm.
And so it flowed really smoothly. We generated a wonderful plan, which went totally out the window when I broke my arm on day one. Um, but we were able to go back to that plan and make adjustments, and we still got a ton of stuff done in the week.
So I want to make sure that I heard this correctly. So it's to use right brain thinking and a left brain process. Is that right? Like a structured process?
Or maybe the other way around, following a right brain process, like we're going to plan this project using left brain attitudes and behaviors, collaboration, appreciation for others.
Okay, so now I'm getting confused. Is that left brain stuff around appreciation for others, or is that right brain? Like
I
I
think,
think of right brain to be more the creative, holistic kind of thing, and left brain more as a systems, procedures, things like that. Have I
yeah,
got that reversed?
I'm not sure. I always mix the two up as well. So that's going to be a research point as soon as we're off this
Well,
call.
anyhow, it's using both appropriately.
Using both appropriately. I think of the creative, innovative side of things, the collaborative side of things, as the lubrication that allows the mechanical side of things to go more smoothly.
Okay.
So with the Industrial Revolution, we're basically running our engine without oil in the crankcase.
Hmm.
And we have to replace gears once in a while and that sort of thing. And it's taken us longer to get to our destination, that sort of thing. I really believe that if we just add a little bit of lubrication to the crankcase, things will go more smoothly. We'll get there on time, on budget, all that sort of stuff. It's not a detriment to learn to be more collaborative when we're engaging with one another on projects.
So, time for some advice to close off this with. So, for the listeners out there, if they wanted to embrace more of this free flowing, the right brain, sort of moving beyond the command and control, it's got its place. But what are some recommendations you'd say on how a person, where would they start thinking about this? What could they start doing?
Um,
I got a
there are
pressure for three. I want three good ones, Jim.
three good ones. Oh boy, let's see. Um, Absorb anything Brene Brown puts out
Okay.
is a good thing. Um,
Right. And I'll include all this in the program notes, by the way. So this is great. So
sure,
absorb Brene
absolutely.
Brown.
Dan Pink is another one who comes up with some really wonderful stuff.
Okay.
Helps us wrap our head around the ideas behind collaboration, that sort of thing. And as a third one, as a personal one, to sit down and reflect about how much we're making up stories about others versus verifying their perspective when they say something that kind of surprises you.
That's I
Instead of
think one of those things that's easier said than done because it requires a little bit of humility and a little bit of vulnerability.
maybe a lot of both when you first start out. Well, because I think that for the most part, we're talking to ourselves and we're making up these stories, and it just gets worse and worse. Um, there's tons of resources out there that you can access that are not part of traditional project planning.
Mhm.
Uh, if you're a if you're a project manager, if you've got your PMP, and I've got my PMP, and I've had it for 23 years, that sort of thing.
That's
That
project management professional.
project management professional from the Project Management
Okay.
Institute,
Okay.
recognize that there's a whole world of other information, the stuff we talked about today, that will make you a more effective project manager. And I definitely I teach project management at SFU, that sort of thing, and I am absolutely sold on that. Is that the I've I've worked with professional project managers that I wouldn't trust to build IKEA furniture, and I've worked with project managers who don't have that on their radar, but they work well with people and they accomplish amazing things.
So my wife has been a project manager for about 30 years, maybe even more. But she would totally support what you're saying, say that, the soft stuff is the hard stuff. The stuff that we say, it's just the people and the communication. That's where things fall apart, and the importance
Yeah.
of doing that right. So, Jim, thank you very much for sticking with it till we could find the time to get together today.
Yeah, no worries.
And offering a few concrete suggestions what people could do if they want to build that side of their self, their DNA, their brain, whatever. And I look forward to the next time we have a chance to chat in person. So thank you so much for being here today.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for having me, David. Appreciate it.
So I'm David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives, here today with Jim Brosseau. And come on back next week and we'll get some different perspectives from a different person. Thanks so much. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.